Republican Senator James Risch of Idaho. He's a key member of the Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks very much for coming in. I know you've been briefed on what authorities know. What can you share with us?
Well, I think that this is similar to the kinds of incidents we've had in the past that you and I have discussed on this show, and that is this is a loner person acting probably inspired, not directed, though they haven't done, obviously, the forensics yet on the computers and phones and that sort of thing. Once that's done, they'll have a better idea of what was the precipitating factor here. As frequently happens with these people, and it appears to be the case here, based on the information that you're showing here and that's come out, and that is he had the American dream in his hand, was brought here as a young child, grew up in American schools and what have you, but then somewhere along the line, he was radicalized. And what precipitated that? What caused that? Maybe some of it will come off of the information on computers and that sort of thing. But as you know, that's a tough job. I've seen you've had the psychiatrists on here over the years trying to pick apart the California or the Florida or the Texas incidents, and it's very difficult to decide what was the turning point.
So is it the working assumption now, Senator, that he acted alone, that no one helped him build those bombs, which were pretty sophisticated?
That is the working assumption right now. There is no evidence to lead to the contrary at this point. That doesn't mean that won't change as the investigation goes on.
And when you say he was inspired by ISIS, Al-Qaeda, another terror group, the Taliban, we know he visited Afghanistan, we know he spent a long time in Pakistan as well.
The answer is yes. We don't know exactly which was which, but as has been pointed out now publicly, that he had on his person a number of things that talked about the jihadist movement. He had information that had been put out by Osama bin Laden, Anwar al-Awlaki, who of course is deceased, but who continues to inspire from the grave. Probably the most inspirational speaker that they have.
Well, that's Al-Qaeda, Anwar al-Awlaki.
They are.
That's Al-Qaeda, the American-born Al-Qaeda leader who was killed in a U.S. drone strike several years ago.
And the same with Osama bin Laden. This is a little different than what we've seen lately.
But you're saying also that in the notebooks that they found, there were references to bin Laden?
There weren't references. I'm told that there were references to bin Laden in there also. So this is kind of back to the future. I mean, the stuff that we've seen recently has all been ISIS. So far, the view seems to be that it's the Al-Qaeda movement that has inspired him. But remember, there isn't a lot of difference. There isn't a lot of room between these two. Al-Qaeda, in essence, morphed into ISIS, and certainly their MOs are different, but their objectives are the same.
Was it an issue of inspired, because that's an important word, as opposed to directed? He did spend some quality time in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where there are elements of Al-Qaeda, very much in Pakistan right now as well. How do they determine whether he was directed, for example, by some Al-Qaeda operative to go back to the United States and do this, as opposed to simply reading on social media and being inspired to do this?
Well, direct evidence is hard to come by, but it's possible based on interviews that are done with people that are around him, perhaps even if they're able to track down what his movements were in Pakistan or Afghanistan when he was there. It's possible to get some direct evidence, but more likely the conclusions are going to have to be based on third-party evidence and that sort of thing.
Circumstantial evidence.
Mostly circumstantial.
Is there evidence he pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda?
There's no evidence to that effect at this point, but we know that's not been uncommon. Usually it turns up somewhere in social media after the fact as the investigation goes on.
Now, for whatever reason, back in 2014, the FBI was called in to investigate. They spent some time investigating him. They thought it was a domestic issue that was nothing connected to terrorism. He was not put on any watch list. He was not considered a terror threat, anything along those lines. With hindsight, was there some blunder there?
Haven't seen that yet. Having said that, what it looks like, and this is strictly in the preliminary stages, but what it looks like is he had these these internal issues in the family, which you just documented pretty clearly, which culminated with him stabbing his brother. The father obviously took the side of the brother and called the FBI and reported the son and used the word terrorist. But when you use the word terrorist and you contact the FBI, that is going to precipitate some movement. And the FBI actually did an investigation, but there was no evidence that there was any corroboration to the father's statement that he was a terrorist. The word terrorist gets thrown around a lot these days, and that's possible that that's what happened here. But there isn't any evidence to indicate that they should go forward. There's various steps that they do when they open these investigations, and they didn't have. They have to triage them. There are so many of these things going on. They have to take the most serious.
But at a minimum, you believe, Senator Risch, this was at least an Al-Qaeda-inspired terror attack in New Jersey and New York.
I believe that.
I want you to stay with us because there's more information coming in. We have more questions for you. Senator Risch, a member of the Intelligence Committee, is with us. We'll continue the conversation right after a quick break. We're back with the Senate Intelligence Committee member, Senator James Risch, as we follow breaking news in the New York and New Jersey bombing investigation. The FBI now confirming it opened an investigation into the bombing suspect back in 2014, but it never revealed ties to terrorism. Do you have a good clue right now, Senator Risch, why he went to these 4 separate locations, including that Marine 5K run in New Jersey, to plant these bombs?
We really don't. Again, hopefully, that's information that they'll be able to glean from the social media things that he's maybe posted from his
because in
computers.
that notebook that they found references to the Boston Marathon bombing, right. And then now there's a bomb put at a Marine 5K run in New Jersey that seems similar. Unfortunately, it was delayed, the start of that run. Nobody was hurt, but right. That could have been a disaster.
It could have been a disaster. The fact that these pressure cookers were used, very, very similar to the Boston incident, has inspiration written all over it. I mean,
copycat.
It's a copycat type of thing. It's what amazes me is if you look at the kinds of explosions that those pressure cookers cause, it is amazing to me that no one was hurt worse or killed in the explosion that happened.
It was a highly unstable, I'm reading here, explosive HMTD. Right. That's a pretty powerful explosive.
It is, it's unstable. But in addition to that, as has been reported, the pressure cookers were full of shrapnel kind of material, BBs, ball bearings, and that sort of thing. And has been reported, the buildings around there showed the marks of what looked like an explosion, as you'd see during the war, or like you still see in Europe, left over from World War II, where the buildings are actually pockmarked from these kinds of explosions.
So those bombs, they could have hurt and killed a lot of people.
It is amazing that this wasn't worse than what it was.
The wife, a few days before the terror attacks, all of a sudden flies off, heading, we assume at some point, to either Afghanistan or Pakistan, but winds up, at least at an initial stop, in the United Arab Emirates. What do we know about her?
I haven't been briefed on that yet, but she is talking to U.S. authorities, and we will be briefed on that in the near future. That would tell me that something was going on with this guy. That seems to be the profile that we keep seeing, where something triggers this response in the individual. Just as, remember the speculations we had when the incident that happened in California, where he'd gone to this Christmas party and then he got angry at the party or something, got up and left, and then the rest is history. This, again, something triggers, it seems like, and I suspect maybe that's what's happened here, and she saw something coming and left.
Any indication he's cooperating, he's talking? We know he's been in the hospital. He was shot in that incident where he shot a police officer, a couple police officers. Is he cooperating? Is he talking? Is he saying anything?
The last report was that he was not cooperating with authorities. That was the last report.
Do you agree with Senator Lindsey Graham? He should be cited as an enemy combatant and not afforded the traditional rights, the Miranda rights, and all of that?
Well, you know, when you have an incident like this and you can clearly tie it to terrorism, I'm all on board with the debate that's been going on as far as when you make war on your own country, in this sort of fashion, when we are at war with a group like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, you should be afforded the rights that an enemy combatant has. not the rights that you've turned on your own country to abandon.
And the headline, at a minimum, Al-Qaeda-inspired terror attacks.
At a minimum, and it may be directed, but we're too early in the investigation to make that judgment.
Senator Risch, thank you so much for coming.